one in May.
Yeah.
I hope not. But you know what? This could be the year.
Thank you.
It has snowed on my kids' birthdays, and they are April 29th and 30th.
So I don't have an extra one. It has more, but 6. But I have put extras in.
Together. Good job. Call this meeting of your Newark City Council to order. Janine, please call the roll.
Mr. Harris.
Here.
Ms. Hattinger. Here. Mr. Hauser.
Here.
Mr. Labutus.
Here.
Mr. Lang.
Present.
Mr. Marmy.
Present.
Mr. Rath. Mr. Ryan.
Here.
Mr. Barker.
Here.
Ms. Blind. Here.
We have 9 here or present this evening. Next on the agenda, we have the invocation by Mr. Labutus. Please rise.
Shall we pray? Heavenly Father, we come to you pray this evening. We thank you for this day that you have given us, another day to serve you. I ask that you be with us this evening in our discussions, in our conversations. May they be blessed and help us always to remember your vision for our city. These things I ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Next, we have with us tonight Mason Lois, 4th grader from St. Francis de Sales. She's going to come up and lead us in the pledge. Mason, whenever you're ready.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mason. Did a good job. Smart yesterday. Next, we have caucus this evening. That's the time for council to discuss anything pertaining to the agenda. Do we have anything?
Mr. President,
Mr. Marmy.
make a motion to excuse Mr. Rath.
Motion by Mr. Marmy, second by Mr. Labutus. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Thank you. Anything else for caucus this evening? Seeing none, next we have the minutes of our February 22nd, 2022 meeting. Motion to approve those.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Barker,
Second.
second by Mr. Labutus. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Thank you. We have no appointments this evening. We have 3 reports this evening from standing committees, one from finance, one from service, and one from economic development. Without objection, those will be received and filed. We have 1 report this evening from city officials, work of Licking County Municipal Court, Marcia Phelps, the 2021 annual report. That will be received and filed. We have a proclamation this evening by Mayor Hall. Mayor?
Yes, thank you, President. Board of Developmental Disabilities, this is Developmental Disabilities Month in March, and no one is able to join us this evening, but I did issue a proclamation. I'd like to recommend it this evening. Whereas for more than 7 decades, the Licking County Board of Developmental Disabilities has worked closely with community partners to help people with disabilities achieve the things that are important to them. People with disabilities and our family members, neighbors, coworkers, and our friends. When they are surrounded by strong support teams, they're more likely to meet their outcomes. When they succeed, our entire county is stronger. Every year during the month of March, the Licking County Board of Developmental Disabilities takes time to recognize the accomplishments of people with disabilities and highlight the partnerships that allow the agency to impact county residents every day. Now, therefore, I, Jeff Hall, Mayor of the great city of Newark, do hereby proclaim the month of March 2022 as Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month in Newark, Ohio, and extend my gratitude to the countless partners who work hand in hand with Licking County Board of Developmental Disabilities, staff members, and the people they support to create strong teams. Working together brings our community together and empowers us all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very, very well said. Thank you. You say there is no one here, right?
There's no one here to accept that. They said they would make sure they're here next year. So.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep.
Next, under communications, we have 1 communication this evening from Roger Loomis, the Water Administrator. Properties being sent for lien for past due water, sewer, and stormwater bills in the amount of $8,153.58. Next on the agenda, we have comments from citizens. That's the time for you to be heard. Again, there's 2 spots for citizens' comments. One is now, one is after the legislation. This is not a debate or a question and answer period with council. This is your opportunity to be heard. If anyone would like to speak this first section, please raise your hand and I will call you up. Tammy, will come on up. If you'll just come on up to the lecture there, and if you'll just give us your name and address for the record. Would anybody else like to speak this first section?
Patricia Newman, my address is 15 South Park Place, downtown. You want me to?
Go right ahead.
All right, well, thanks for allowing me to go first. As I said, I live in downtown Newark on property on South Park Place. I've been living here for about 4 years. And I'm also the president of the Downtown Newark Association. So it's been brought to my attention by many of our members that there's extreme dissatisfaction with the snow plowing in downtown, particularly with this last big storm. It's not just this year, it's happened before, but there are berms left behind where the snowplows don't scrape close enough to the curb and nobody comes and cleans off the curb so people can, when they leave their cars and try to get to the sidewalk, they're left with a mountain of snow and ice. So I understand, I brought it up to the CID, that it's an issue. It's a safety issue, and it's an issue that the merchants are concerned about because of loss of business. If people can't get out of their cars safely and get to their stores or shops, that hurts them. So I thought I would bring it up tonight as something to discuss and think about. We've got plenty of time between now and the next snowfall.
Let's hope.
Maybe we can, maybe we can talk about getting the proper equipment purchase that will handle these types of instances. And I have personally seen people fall. I'm surprised that someone hasn't been hurt very badly. It's a safety issue. So that's what I wanted to bring up.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Next on the agenda this evening, we have ordinances on the second reading. There are none. We'll move to ordinances on the first reading, 22-04.
Ordinance number 22-04 by Mr. Marmy and Ms. Blind. Ordinance number 22-04 to provide the issuance of not to exceed $1,125,000 of bond anticipation notes in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying the cost of Church Street area improvements and repair, including electrical, sidewalk, street, and streetscape, and all necessary appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency.
22-04 is on its first reading, but it is an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Marmy.
I make a motion to adopt resolution 22-04.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Marmy.
Second.
Second by Mr. Labutus. Is there any discussion on 22-04? Seeing none, Janine, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Ms. Hattinger.
Yes.
Mr. Hauser.
Yes.
Mr. Labutus.
Yes.
Mr. Lang.
Yes.
Mr. Marmy.
Yes.
Mr. Rath. Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Barker.
Yes.
Ms. Blind. Yes.
22-04 passes 9-0. Next, we move on the first reading to 22-05.
Ordinance number 22-05 by Mr. Marmy and Ms. Blind to provide for the issuance of $550,000 of bond anticipation notes in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying a portion of the city's cost for Horns Hill Road sanitary sewer project improvements and declaring an emergency.
Again, 22-05, it's on its first reading, but it is an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Marmy.
I make a motion to adopt ordinance 22-05.
Motion by Mr. Marmy,
Second.
second by Mr. Labutus. Do we have any discussion on 22-05? Seeing none, Janine, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Ms. Hattinger.
Yes.
Mr. Hauser.
Yes.
Mr. Labutus.
Yes.
Mr. Lang.
Yes.
Mr. Marmy.
Yes.
Mr. Rath. Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Barker.
Yes.
Ms. Blind. Yes.
22-05 passes 9-0. Next on the first reading, we have 22-06.
Ordinance number 22-06 by Mr. Marmy and Ms. Blind to provide for the issuance of $500,000 of bond anticipation notes in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying the cost of construction of the stream bank protection project, including replacement of the sheet pile dam on Raccoon Creek, site preparation and all necessary appurtenances, and declaring an emergency.
And 22-06 is on its first reading, but it's an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Marmy.
make a motion to adopt ordinance 22-06.
Motion by Mr. Marmy,
Second.
second by Mr. Lang. Is there any discussion on 22-06? Seeing none, Janine, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Ms. Hattiger.
Yes.
Mr. Hauser.
Yes.
Mr. Labutus.
Yes.
Mr. Lang.
Yes.
Mr. Marmy.
Yes.
Mr. Rath. Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Barker.
Yes.
Ms. Blind.
Yes.
22-06 passes 9-0. Next on the first reading, we have 22-07.
Ordinance number 22-07 by Mr. Marmy and Ms. Blind, an ordinance consolidating 3 bond anticipation notes issues of the city of Newark, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
22-07 is on its first reading, but it is an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Marmy.
make a motion to adopt ordinance 22-07.
Motion by Mr. Marmy, second by Mr. Labutus. Is there any discussion on 22-07? Seeing none, Janine, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Ms. Hattiger.
Yes.
Mr. Hauser.
Yes.
Mr. Labutus.
Yes.
Mr. Lang.
Yes.
Mr. Marmy.
Yes.
Mr. Rath. Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Barker.
Yes.
Ms. Blind.
Yes.
22-07 passes 9-0. Next on the first reading, we have 22-08.
Ordinance number 22-08 by Mr. Barker, Mr. Marmy, Mr. Harris, an ordinance changing the zoning classification of certain real property generally described as multiple parcels on Hudson Avenue, Elmwood Avenue, and Mount Vernon Road between State Route 16 and St. Clair and Hoover Streets, City of Newark, Licking County, Ohio, from that of CSI Church School Institutional, GO General Office, LB Limited Intensity Business, MB Medium Intensity Business, MFR Multifamily Residence, Single Family Residence, RH High Density, and TRF 2 Family Residence Districts to DC Downtown District, zoning code of the City of Newark, Ohio.
22-08 will be sent to the planning commission for their discussion, and then we'll come back to council for a vote. That'll be about 6 weeks, or 6 to 8 weeks, somewhere in that vicinity. Next, we have 22-09.
Ordinance number 22-09 by Mr. Barker, Mr. Harris, Mr. Marmy, and Ms. Blind, an ordinance changing the zoning classification of certain real property generally described as 1303 Log Pond Drive, City of Newark, Licking County, Ohio, parcel tax ID number 054-269-904.00.000, zoning change of only 3.648 acres from that of GB General Business District to MFR Multifamily Residence District, zoning code of the City of Newark, Ohio.
And 22-09 will also be sent to the planning commission for their discussion, and then we'll come back to council for a vote. And last, we have 22-10 on the first reading.
Ordinance number 22-10 by Mr. Barker, Mr. Marmy, Mr. Harris, and Ms. Blind, an ordinance changing the zoning classification of certain real properties generally described as 170 Riverview Drive, City of Newark, Licking County, Ohio, parcel tax ID number 054-276-750-00.00.000 and number 054-270-288-00.000 from that of GB General Business District to MFR Multifamily Residence District, zoning code of the City of Newark, Ohio.
And also 22-10 will be sent to the planning commission for their discussion, and we'll come back to council. Okay. Deep breath. Next, we'll go to resolutions on the second reading, 22-08.
Resolution number 22-08 by Mr. Rath, Ms. Hattiger, Mr. Marmy, Ms. Blind, Mr. Barker, Mr. Harris, and Mr. Lang. A resolution authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service of the City of Newark, Ohio to apply for, accept, and enter into a water pollution control loan fund agreement on behalf of the City of Newark for planning, design, and or construction of wastewater facilities, South Second Street Interceptor Project, and designating a dedicated repayment source for the loan.
You've heard the second reading of 22-08. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Harris.
I make the motion on the resolution 22-08.
Motion to pass by Mr. Harris, second by Mr. Labutus. Is there any discussion on 22-08? Seeing none, Janine, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Ms. Hattiger.
Yes.
Mr. Hauser.
Yes.
Mr. Labutus.
Yes.
Mr. Lang.
Yes.
Mr. Marmy.
Yes.
Mr. Rath. Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Barker.
Yes.
Ms. Blind.
Yes.
22-08 passes 9-0. Next, we go on to 22-09.
Resolution number 22-09 by Mr. Marmy, Ms. Hattiger, Mr. Barker, Mr. Harris, Mr. Lang, and Ms. Blind, a resolution appropriating monies for current expenses of the municipal corporation.
You've heard the second reading of 22-09. What is your wish?
Mr. President. Make a motion.
Mr. Marmy, I'm sorry. I was trying to figure out who said it. Mr. Marmy, I'm sorry.
Make a motion to adopt resolution 22-09.
Second. Motion to adopt by Mr. Marmy, second by Mr. Hauser. Is there any discussion on 22-09? Seeing none, Jenny, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Ms. Hattiger.
Yes.
Mr. Hauser.
Yes.
Mr. Labutus.
Yes.
Mr. Lang.
Yes.
Mr. Marmy.
Yes.
Mr. Rath. Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Barker.
Yes.
Ms. Blind. Yes.
22-09 passes 9-0. Next on the second reading, we have 22-10.
Resolution number 22-10 by Ms. Hattiger, Mr. Marmy, Mr. Barker, Mr. Harris, Mr. Hauser, Mr. Rath, Mr. Lang, and Ms. Blind. A resolution appropriating monies for current expenses of the municipal corporation.
Heard the second reading of 22-10. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mrs. Bonner.
I ask that we adopt resolution 2210.
Motion to adopt by Mrs. Bonner.
Second.
Second by Mr. Labutus. Is there any discussion on 22-10? Seeing none, Janine, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Ms. Hattiger.
Yes.
Mr. Hauser.
Yes.
Mr. Labutus.
Yes.
Mr. Lang.
Yes.
Mr. Marmy.
Yes.
Mr. Rath. Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Barker.
Yes.
Ms. Blind. Yes.
22-10 passes 9-0. Next, on the second reading, we have 22-11.
Resolution number 22-11 by Mr. Rath, Mr. Marmy, Mr. Barker, Mr. Lang, Ms. Blind,
Everybody.
and Ms. Hattiger. A resolution authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service to advertise for bids and enter into contracts subject to the appropriation of funds for various construction projects.
You've heard the second reading of 22-11. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Marmy.
make a motion to adopt resolution 22-11.
Motion by Mr. Marmy,
Second.
second by Mr. Lang. Is there any discussion on 22-11? Seeing none, Janine, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Ms. Hattiger.
Yes.
Mr. Hauser.
Yes.
Mr. Labutus.
Yes.
Mr. Lang.
Yes.
Mr. Marmy.
Yes.
Mr. Rath. Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Barker.
Yes.
Ms. Blind. Yes.
22-11 passes 9-0. And finally, we have 22-13.
Resolution number 22-13 by Mr. Rath, Mr. Marmy, Mr. Lang, Mr. Barker, Mr. Harris, and Ms. Blind. Project consisting of the construction of a single lane roundabout at the 4th Street, State Route 13, West Main Street, County Road 132 intersection, including walkway, curb ramps, drainage, lighting, signage, pavement markings, and landscaping lying within the city of Newark.
You've heard the second reading of 22-13. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Harris.
I make a motion to adopt resolution 22-13.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Harris, second by Mr. Barker. Is there any discussion on 22-13? See none, Janine, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Ms. Hattiger.
Yes.
Mr. Hauser.
Yes.
Mr. Labutus.
Yes.
Mr. Lang.
Yes.
Mr. Marmy.
Yes.
Mr. Rath. Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Barker.
Yes.
Ms. Blind. Yes.
22-13 passes 9-0. And finally, tonight we move on to resolutions on the first reading, 22-14.
Resolution number 22-14 expedite by Mr. Marmy, Mr. Barker, Ms. Hattiger, and Ms. Blind. A resolution appropriating monies for current expenses of the municipal corporation.
22-14.
Mr. President,
Mr. Marmy,
make a motion to waive the 2-day reading rule on resolution 22-14.
motion to waive the 2-day reading rule by Mr. Marmy.
Second.
Second by Mr. Lang. Mr. Marmy.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have some things that need to be expedited in order to meet deadlines.
Thank you, Mr. Marmy. Janine, please call the roll, waive the 2-day reading rule.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Ms. Hattiger.
Yes.
Mr. Hauser.
Yes.
Mr. Labutus.
Yes.
Mr. Lang.
Yes.
Mr. Marmy.
Yes.
Mr. Rath. Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Barker.
Yes.
Ms. Blind. Yes.
2-day reading rule has been waived. Mr. Marmy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Make a motion to adopt resolution 22-14.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Marmy.
Second.
Second by Mr. Lang. Is there any discussion on 22-14? Seeing none, Janine, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Ms. Hattiger.
Yes.
Mr. Hauser.
Yes.
Mr. Labutus.
Yes.
Mr. Lang.
Yes.
Mr. Marmy.
Yes.
Mr. Rath. Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Barker.
Yes.
Ms. Blind. Yes.
22-14 passes 9-0. Next on the first reading, we go to 22-15.
Resolution number 22-15 by Mr. Marmy, Mr. Barker, Mr. Harris, Ms. Hattiger, and Ms. Blind. A resolution authorizing and directing the mayor of the city of Newark to apply for funding from the United States Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance under the Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant Program.
22-15 will be held for 2 weeks until our next meeting. March 21st. Next, we have 22-16.
Resolution number 22-16 by Mr. Marmy, Mr. Barker, Ms. Hattiger, and Ms. Blind. A resolution authorizing and directing the mayor of City of Newark to submit an application to the Ohio Department of Public Safety for an award of fiscal year 2022-2023 funding under the Ohio EMS Training and Equipment Grant Program.
And 22-16 will be held for 2 weeks until our next meeting for the second reading. And on the first reading, we have 22-17.
Resolution number 22-17 by Mr. Harris, Mr. Marmy, Mr. Barker, and Ms. Blind. A resolution authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service to accept bids and sell certain surplus personal property now owned by the City of Newark, Ohio, and declaring that such property is no longer needed for any municipal purpose and declaring an emergency.
22-17 is on its first reading, but is an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Harris.
I make a motion to waive the 2-day reading rule on resolution 22-17.
Since it's an emergency, you could just make a motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt. Okay.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Harris,
Second.
second by Mr. Barker. Is there any discussion on 22-17? Seeing none, Jenny, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Ms. Hattiger.
Yes.
Mr. Hauser.
Yes.
Mr. Labutus.
Yes.
Mr. Lang.
Yes.
Mr. Marmy.
Yes.
Mr. Rath. Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Barker.
Yes.
Ms. Blind.
Yes.
22-17 passes 9-0. Next, we move on to 22-18.
Resolution number 22-18 by Mr. Barker, Mr. Marmy, and Ms. Blind. A resolution in support of the application for an Ohio Historic Preservation Tax Credit to be filed by HACR Partners LLC for the rehabilitation of 169 Hudson Avenue, Newark, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
22-18 is on its first reading, but it is an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President, I make a motion to adopt 22-18.
Motion by Mr. Barker. Second by Mr. Ryan. Is there any discussion on 22-18?
Mr. President,
This is I.
I apologize, but I didn't realize it was declaring an emergency. I have to abstain on this.
Mrs. Potter will be abstaining. I'm sorry, I just have to leave now.
Yes.
Anybody else? Seeing none, Janine, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Ms. Hattiger.
Abstain.
Mr. Hauser.
Yes.
Mr. Labutus.
Yes.
Mr. Lang.
Yes.
Mr. Marmy.
Yes.
Mr. Rath. Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Barker.
Yes.
Ms. Blind.
Yes.
22-18 passes 8-0 and 1 abstention. And finally, this evening, we have 22-19.
Resolution number 22-19 by Mr. Marmy, Mr. Barker, Ms. Hattiger, Ms. Blind. A resolution appropriating monies for current expenses of the municipal corporation.
And 22-19 will be held for 2 weeks until our next meeting. That concludes the legislation. Thank you for hanging with us this evening. Okay, next we have our second opportunity for comments from citizens. Again, this is not a debate with council. This is your opportunity to be heard. If you'd like to be heard, raise your hand, then I'll have you come on up, ma'am. Anybody else would like to be heard? I got you.
Linda Mossholder, 224 Green Meadow Drive, Newark, Ohio. Just wanted to give council hopefully the final update on the warming center that we did this winter. We were open 15 or 16 times. The threshold is when the temperature at the Newark Airport is predicted to be at 15 or below. We served a maximum on one night of 24 people, and the minimum that we served were 9. We also worked with in cooperation with the Licking County Coalition for Housing. They were invited to possibly come to one of the warming centers, but they were unable to provide staff. So what we did for them is that we collected information from the individuals who were there, giving them permission to contact people who were staying at the warming centers. Many of the people stayed more than one night. It wasn't something where we saw different individuals each time. I then took those slips, scanned them, and then, basically sent them to the Coalition for Housing. Unfortunately, they were able to follow up with some of the people, but I would say at least a third of the people did not have phones. So there was really no way to contact them. And unfortunately, there's very little housing available to assist the people. I would like to say that every night that we were open, with the exception of maybe one time, all of our people who came were very polite. They were very grateful to be in out of the cold weather. We did have to call the squad one night, because one of a gentleman's toes just looked really bad. He was taken to the hospital, treated, and then released. And I did see him at another warming shelter. The only thing he had on his feet, and he had just like tennis shoes with the little socks that you get when you're in the hospital, so you don't slip and fall. So that made us think that we needed to kind of put a cry out for some boots. Most of the people coming to the warming shelter were in tennis shoes. And if you're walking around in wet, cold weather in tennis shoes, you're gonna get frostbite. So we were able to put out a request for boots. Hospital bought, I think, 30 pairs of boots. We collected over 100 pairs of boots from different churches and different places. So we were able to, basically, anybody who came in who had tennis shoes or had cold feet, we were able to give them boots. The remainder of the boots were given out at the homeless outreach. The gentleman who had just those little socks on from the hospital, he did show up at the outreach, still with his tennis shoes. Tennis shoes, we didn't have the boots when he came to the Disciple Factory. We were able to get him some warm socks. When we took off his socks, one of the people that the volunteers, a nurse, she said, his bandages are wet. We need to do something. We cannot provide medical attention at the outreach. So we were able to at least get him dry socks and boots that fit. And we continue to give boots out the following weeks. So I wanted to thank Mr. Harris, did stop by at the Disciple Factory, and so did Miss Blind. I would encourage you to be open again for someone to stop by Trinity. It's two completely different types of situations. Pastor Critter we're very grateful that he opens, but he's a little less stringent on the wearing of masks. We require all of our volunteers to wear masks at Trinity, just to keep the spread of COVID down. So I would suggest, stopping by. The other thing that I would like to bring up is, I don't know if you're aware, but the health department has issued 2 alerts for overdoses in the area. We work pretty closely with the health department. Mr. Brown notifies us where the areas where these are occurring. The ones that we're aware of where fatal overdoses did occur. One was on Idlewild and the other one was on Elmwood. When we get that notice, we have Narcan on hand. We make a special trip down the road with the Narcan to see if we can find people to give Narcan to. If you're not familiar, Narcan is the overdose reversal drug. We normally give out about 50 of those on a Saturday. Last Saturday, we gave out 124 kits. Some of those kits were multiple kits that we gave to people who came and said, hey, I live on this street. We know this is happening. I don't want another person to die. We know of at least one person who's still in intensive care. We're not sure the status of the other people. My church was able to obtain 500 kits of Narcan, which I've been sharing with the outreach, completely out of Narcan. So we have put in a request for more. So we're going to be out there on the street giving out the Narcan as long as the situation continues. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am? While she's making her way up, anybody else like to speak? Okay, just give us your name and address for the record.
Elizabeth Royster, 918 King Road. So I was just wondering, the motions you guys were discussing and voting on, where could I find those in full to read about them and learn more?
The legislation we passed.
Motion 1018, I believe in its first reading about the bulletproof vests, I believe you guys brought up. I just was curious where I can find all the motions in full.
If you want to stick around that afterwards, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Any city officials this evening? Well, it's not 8 o'clock already. We'll let you go ahead. Law Director Moore.
No, I have passed. Thank you.
Mayor Hall.
I will pass the evening too.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Harris, your first this evening.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank our firefighters. Last week when Bellamy's caught on fire, I went down there and just to see how hard they worked and everything that they did and had to do. And all the other fire departments that came in. It was, I don't want to use the word. What the firefighters were impressive putting out the fire. So, if you guys ever know there's a fire, you should go down and support the firefighters. And it's just a bummer that Lummies, are down. So hopefully they can rebuild that. I need to call a service committee meeting for March 21st. And then to the snow plowing, Mark and all the people that plow the snow do a good job. They work hard. They are here about 4 o'clock in the morning. They do the best that they can. This winter was a different kind of winter snow. But I want to give them guys credit for all they do. It's not an easy job, and I appreciate what they do. So, and I also want to thank Janine for putting up with all our names. You're doing a good job. So maybe we need to all of us need to take handwriting classes up here. So
Or print.
Hey, mine was pretty clear.
and with that, I pass.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Yeah.
Mrs. Ottinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just, 2 quick things. Want to thank the street department. I know they have their hands full right now with trying to keep up with filling potholes, and the ones that I've been reporting have been getting fixed. I'm sure that it's just an ongoing cycle until we can get the hospital things open and get paving done and everything, but they work really hard trying to make sure that as many potholes can get filled as possible. So I want to thank them for that. And it's just a reminder, I brought this up last time, but there is a SID meeting here on Wednesday at 5 o'clock. It's an important one because we are discussing the future of the SID and it is up for renewal. And one of the things that we've asked property owners if they would want the SID to take over snow plowing to see, if that is something that they want. It would cost a tremendous amount of money, to be honest. And that would be something that the SID property owners would have to bear the cost of. So we'll see what the outcome of that is. But Mrs. Newcomb did speak to the SID about it, and Mr. Rhodes was there, and he also explained that, as what you said, Mr. Harris, with the layers of ice and snow with the past, I still have actually ice in my yard, and it was 74 degrees this weekend. So it has to go somewhere, and unfortunately, that's just, we weren't able to keep up with plowing and getting the ice, and it was just very unfortunate. And I understand the frustration from the business owners of getting people there, but I do think that that was kind of a one-off. I do think we try to take care of snow as much as we can. It is not a SID responsibility. It is a city and property owner responsibility. But I think we can learn a lot of lessons, obviously, from the snowstorms. But I think we do a great job. But if you have any suggestions for the SID as far as good things, bad things, we're trying to get a renewal, if we're going to leave the cost the same, et cetera, please come on Wednesday and voice your opinions. Or let me know if you can't be there. Let me know if you have opinions too. I'll be happy to share those on your behalf. Done it, pass.
Thank you, Mrs. Ottinger. Mr. Hauser.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to echo Councilman Harris' comments about Bummies. That was pretty sad to see a great business like that. So prayers to go out to the owners there. And
Mr. Hauser. Mr. Labutus.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple of things. I too would like to thank the streets department. There's a few problems that I reported on C-Click Fix, and they were fixed within a few days. I got a report back on my phone within the app that said where she was called. So that's a great resource to utilize. And I know some other council members have spoken about that over the past few weeks as well. And then secondly, I'd like to announce that on April 8th, the historic Fifth Street Gym, which used to be the Newark High School gym, is currently owned by Greenville Christian Academy. They're having a fundraiser that night. to help renovate the gym. They obviously want to keep it historic, but also want to renovate it as well. So that would be April 8th from 6 to 9:30 p.m. You do need to purchase tickets for that, and you can do that on their website, which is greenvilleca.org. That's April 8th from 6 to 9:30. That I will pass.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Lang.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Lang. Mr. Marmy.
Thank you, Mr. President. First thing I need to call a finance committee meeting for the 21st. I just want to kind of chime in a little bit about the snow plowing in the downtown area. One thing that I want to start off by saying is that I believe that our street department and the way that our service director has handled snow plowing, it's been incredible, and it's done a fantastic job, in particular with some of the different snowfalls that we've had in the ice, in particular, that situation. I am going to comment that their responsibility is to plow the streets and to make sure that our streets are clear. And we will risk putting ourselves in a position that if we are cleaning the downtown sidewalks, well, my driveway gets a whole thing of snow when it does get plowed, gets a whole thing of snow right in front of it. It's my responsibility as a business owner to clear my driveway, even if the snow plows come through and push snow there. I believe that if there's a solution that is a manner in which they plow the downtown area that could assist, I believe that that could be incorporated. But as far as city funding of equipment and manpower to plow the parking of the downtown area so that the sidewalk accessibility and everything, I don't think I can support that, because that's a property owner's responsibility. And I don't believe that's a city or municipality's responsibility. And although I do feel for, I'm a business owner and I had to plow mine out, dig mine out 3 times. And I know what it takes in order for that to happen. Also, I know what I had to do at my home, just clearing my driveway so we can get the vehicles out, because it's their responsibility to make sure the streets are clear. And that is their primary role and responsibility, and I support that. And so that's kind of where I stand on the whole thing. And if Sherry, that's my opinion about where we're at on that. And with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Marmy. Mr. Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to announce that we are having a neighborhood block watch meeting on the 17th. So that's next Thursday at the police station at 6:30. We'll be having a presentation from the NPD Special Operations Group. So that should be fun. We'll be discussing issues and problems with any ward. It's 4th, 6th, and 7th, but anybody's welcome to come. And with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan.
Could you
Mr.
repeat
Parker?
the date on that?
No, not now.
Obviously,
Mr. Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll pass.
Ms. Vaughn. Thank you, Mr. Parker.
Sir, well, I thank you getting a chance to thank people, and I like to thank Joe Paul. I apologize, I've kept his docket full, but I'm learning, and I'm grateful for his time. And I'm thankful for Buster, the street department. We had a long chat over the phone, and I'm learning processes and how things are done through that as well. And I'm grateful for the law department and going up and down the rungs, learning how things are done and processes of arrests and non-arrests. And it's been good. And first, what's Sid? Before I comment.
Downtown Newark Special Improvement District.
Thank you. Okay,
Sorry,
so there we go, there we go. And I also want to highlight the upcoming zoning, possibility of zoning changes. So the citizens are out there, and if you're watching, or I know the Advocate is not as red as it used to be, but there's zoning is huge. And when zoning changes,
the possibilities for everything comes. Well, we don't know. We don't know what happens when zoning changes. We can't tell the future, but we do know there are going to be changes. So in a time of great change, right now, it's a prod for us as citizens to get up on the law and have foresight for our communities and say, if this zoning goes through, what will happen in my community? Or to say, no, I don't want zoning changes. And so please, this, like Mr. Ellington has said so many times, this is your city council. This is your place to let your voice be heard. Because when zoning changes, it can be changed for generations. And so we may or may not know what comes of it. So please, it's an open door of opportunity for citizens to come. Let your vision be given, let your voice be heard.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bond. Our next meeting will be March 21st. Committees start at 5:45 here in this room. Full council will start promptly at 7 p.m. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Labuda, second by Mr. Harris. All those in favor signify by saying aye.